I was going to come with a great, big, heavy German accent, but I knew y'all wouldn't believe it. It's been so many years since I've had a German accent, I've forgotten what a German accent is like. But my father had one. Of course, I'm very honored to be here tonight because I'm a conversionite? Conversite? Whatever. There you go, conversion. I was born in Germany, in Berlin, and arrived here at a very young, tender age as the son of a German scientist. The German scientists were chosen by President Truman in 1946 or so, and 476 of them were asked to come to the United States. And those 476 were called Operation Paperclip. And the medical doctors and medical team and medical visionaries came to San Antonio. Now they always say came to San Antonio. They didn't. They came to Converse and shirts. There wasn't a Universal City. But they came to this area because of Randolph. And I was one of those. I was the son of one of those. I want to read you 5 quotes by very famous people. I'd like you to reflect on those a little bit. The first one is, everything that can be invented has been invented. This was quoted by Charles Duell in 1893. He was the director of the U.S. Patent Office. Who the hell wants to hear actors talk? Henry Warner, Warner Brothers. Sensible and responsible women do not want to vote. Grover Cleveland, President, 1905. There is no likelihood that man can ever trap the power of the atom. Robert Millikan, the inventor of the Millikan oil drop experiment and the cracker of the atom later on, 1930. Heavier than air flying machines are not possible. Lord Kelvin, President of the Royal Society of London. Now, these are very, very famous people who did some very, very famous things. And they were wrong. I want to tell you something that you're not wrong about, and that's Converse. Now, I left here in 1967. I got married. That happens, doesn't it? And I taught in the Northeast schools for several years, really enjoyed it. My wife was at the University of Texas, God help me because I'm an Aggie. And I moved to Austin so she could finish her degree at the University of Texas. And shortly after that, your neighbors, told my uncle to draft me. Some of you will remember the draft. This is where they told young men between 18 and 22 that they had to serve in the Army. And so I had to serve in the Army for 3 years, despised every minute of it. But as I was talking with Mr. Shale, yeah, I despised it. Yeah, I hated it. But you know what? I learned something. I learned a lot. And I became someone else. I grew up. I didn't want to grow up. I thought I was Peter Pan. I thought I could stay a kid all my life. I liked teaching. I liked teaching kids. But I learned something in the Army. I learned that hell is nothing like El Paso, Texas. That's hell. They paint the rocks green out there to pretend there's grass. It's an unlovely place. As Admiral Perry said when he found the South Pole, God, this is an awful place. And I agree. El Paso was mind-boggling. Well, when I left El Paso, I was assigned to the duty station of Fort Sam Houston, Texas. So I came back home, and I taught clinical chemistry at the Medical Field Service School, and I learned something. I learned a lot. I trained 25 cycles of 30 kids each to become medical laboratory technicians. And I learned a lot about medical laboratory and about young people. And I can't say I enjoyed my stay in the Army, but I sure did learn a lot. You know, I learned something about getting a doctorate at Texas A&M. I learned that you always quote other people, you never quote yourself. Jealousy is the tribute mediocrity pays to genius. Bishop Fulton J. Sheen. There is no history, only fictions of varying degrees of plausibility. Voltaire. He's right. So what is the history of Converse? Converse has an amazing history. Converse is a diamond in the rough. And please, please believe me, as an ancient person who has lived a long time on this planet. I used to tell my students that I knew God when she was a little girl. I mean, I've been around a long, long time. And Converse is a diamond in the rough. Not very rough anymore. You should have seen it in 1947. And it was rough. I mean, there was Rhodia's store, which isn't a store anymore, it's Rosie Borland's antique shop. And next to Rhodia's store, there's an old farmhouse. No, Converse didn't have a water system, everybody had their own cistern. We lived in that house next to Rhodia's store. Miss Schertz ran it, Miss Alma Schertz. Never forget her. She lived in the back, we lived in the front. You call it living. There was a door between the two that swung two ways, but she had a hook on her side. She didn't allow us to put a hook on our side, so she could come in, but we couldn't go out. I mean, to her house. You remember the first time my mother ran a bath for my brother and me, and she came screaming through that door, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" We told her, "Mother, I'm running a bath." She says, "You're using too much water." She got a Listo pencil. You won't remember those. It's a wax thing. And she made a line in the bathtub. That high. That much water, no more. My mother thought she was nuts. But the water came from the cistern. And when the cistern was empty, the water was gone. It's not the Converse you live in anymore. The Converse you live in now, you turn on the tap, and clean water comes out of it. Unlike some little communities near Round Rock, Texas, where I live right now, where you turn on the tap and if something comes out, it's probably a dead fish. So, I mean, not every place in Texas has nice clean water. Converse does. I remember when Converse got the sewer system. They tore up our backyard to put in the sewer pipes. Ooh, my parents were mad. But it's a good thing. Converse grew. And now when I came back, I didn't recognize any of it. My parents' house, where I lived for some 30-odd years, is gone. There's a bus stop there. That's it, a bus stop. The house is gone, it's paved over. Sigh. We live next to the dance hall, the Sala Trio Liederkranz. They're a group of men led by a baronical-type person, Herr von Kalthof, led them with an iron fist. And because we lived next door, they opened up all the little windows because there was no air conditioning. And then they would sing. And then they would take a break. Now, forgive me, but you know what Germans do when they take a break. Then they get back to singing again. Well, they'd sing a couple of songs and take another break. You know, they started singing better every time after a break. Man, by the third or fourth break, they were singing very well. And it was wonderful to listen to. We really enjoyed it. Let's have another quote here. We must separate truth from fact. Mao Zedong. I couldn't help but put that one amazing how people don't understand history. I used to hate it. History meant memorize the names of Civil War places, dates, times. Yuck. I was into science, enjoyed science, hated history. Now I like history. I tolerate science because some of my colleagues are not too bright. Oh, they're bright, they're just not too bright. You know, when I was in school, we had 92 elements. Now there are 116. Everything is growing, everything is changing, everything is moving. And so is Converse. Thank God. But if you remember when you were a little kid, you lie there at night and your legs would hurt, or your arms would hurt, because you were growing. They're called growing pains. And either your mother would rub them, nowadays they give them a pill. Makes you feel better. Converse has growing pains, I'm sure. Fortunately, I don't hear about the growing pains. Yeah, that's the picture. Good work, lady. As she was going through the pictures, I saw this one go by. And I thought, ladies and gentlemen, of all of the pictures she had, of old airplanes and nuclear airplanes, and of the water tower, the Taj Mahal, and Randolph and stuff, that is a picture of the first successful launch and recovery vehicle of the first 3 mice in space. It was my father's project, and I have that vehicle. I won't tell you where I'm keeping it hidden, but I have it. And that picture, out of all of the pictures she had, that, ladies and gentlemen, is due to Converse. My father developed that while we lived right here in our town. He was a genius, yes. He worked at School of Aviation Medicine at Randolph, then School of Aerospace Medicine at Brooks, became the chief scientist for the Air Force, hated it because every minute that he got kicked upstairs, it was more political and less lab. All he wanted was a laboratory, an assistant, and be left alone. And my mother to feed him and clothe him. I remember that every morning my father would walk through the house going, Hemdchen Schäfchen, ich brauche ein Hemdchen Schäfchen. We spoke German at home. Which means, a shirt, my dear, I need a shirt. He couldn't find his own shirts if you drew him a city map. So she got him a shirt, and she buttoned it for him, and she patted him on the hiney, and off he went to work to invent brilliant things and write brilliant stuff. He was fortunate. He had a brilliant secretary. She was an older lady, and a general no longer wanted her, so he dumped her, and my father took her, and she was wonderful. Whenever he wrote stuff on his board in his office that he didn't want other people to know, he wrote it in Greek. My father read, wrote, and spoke Greek, Latin, Italian, German, French, yeah, English too. I was going to start off with one of the speeches that he started off with. When he first came to the United States and he held a speech for a whole bunch of scientists, he wanted to say, gentlemen, take your coats off, it's hot. And he translated very rapidly from German, and he said, gentlemen, remove your clothes, you will like it. And some of them said, you're home. He learned English the hard way, as we did. We didn't have bilingual education when I was in school. I was bilingual. I didn't speak much English, but I learned it very rapidly. Where did I learn English? From the funny papers. We got the funnies. Stuff they don't do anymore. I know television. We didn't have television. I told you I was old. Sorry. We had a radio program that read the funnies to you. And so I had the funnies, and they read the funnies, and I read what they read, and I understood what they were saying pretty soon. My English wasn't too bad. I don't hunt for English words anymore unless it's in English and I'm still looking for it. English is a funny language. It's constantly changing. There are words that I wasn't allowed to use that I'm not allowed to use anymore. When I was a child, you were allowed to say the word fruit, which meant bananas, apples, oranges. Then when I was in high school, you weren't allowed to say fruit anymore because it was a bad term about a person. Now it's not the bad term about a person, and you're not allowed to think that's a bad term by calling them fruits. I'm very confused. But I'm learning. You know, as we get older, we get smarter. My father used to say, we get too soon old and too late smart. And he was right about that. Man, the stuff I've learned and the stuff I just am in awe about. I had a research grant at Brooks. I worked with Dr. Sarah Wilkes, who was one of the inventors of the heart-lung machine. Just an amazing guy. He did an experiment in which he pulled all of the air out of a great big glass container. Dr. Wilkes knew that air pressure, y'all remember air pressure? 14.7 pounds per square inch, right? Boy, there's going to be a test on this. 14.7 pounds per square inch. Well, you get 100 square inches. You got a lot of pounds per square inch on that thing. Well, he wasn't thinking, and the thing collapsed. It's called an implosion. Well, what happens when you implode? Stuff jumps out. And so little glass shards jumped all over and bit Dr. Wilkes. He was in the hospital for a while. He also became deaf because the air pressure did his eardrums in. Well, the Air Force bought hearing aids, and he didn't like them. So he had hearing aids in his ears, and he would walk around with the hearing aids unplugged because he didn't want to hear people talk to him. And he didn't want to hear the phone ring. And he didn't want him to tell, the phone's calling for you, Dr. Wilkes. He's a wonderful man. Boy, he knew his science. And he helped in that. My brother, my father, and I helped develop the first space food. Right on space food is why space food is so delicious today. First of all, you want to know, it doesn't matter what it looks like. If it comes out of a toothpaste tube, and it's perfectly nutritious, does it matter? And so he enlisted two semi-adults, a high school senior and a college junior, my brother. And we ate a food that he developed. It was oatmeal, unflavored box gelatin, unflavored vitamins. Just assume the word unflavored for everything. And everything else, it was perfectly nutritious. It looked like baby throw-up and had no smell and no flavor. Cardboard tastes better. Jell-O, it was jelly-ish. And my mother made it in our kitchen, right here down the street. Oatmeal, no flavor, no sugar, no. Why did he do this? Because he wanted to answer the question. Does flavor matter? Does flavor matter to animals? Probably not so much. Otherwise, vultures wouldn't eat dead meat. And dogs wouldn't turn over the garbage can because it's interesting. But what about mice? Inside that container, in the middle of that container, were 3 little black, mean little mice. They had learned meanness at the School of Education, apparently, because they were mean little mice. They bit. You grab them by the tail, they could literally turn around inside their skin and reach around it. And not only do they bite you like usually mice bite, they bite and they hold. So when you shake them, they hold on. Oh, mean little devils. But they were very useful. They were black Swiss mice. They were only that big, so they didn't weigh too much. And any time radiation would strike them at a hair follicle, the hair would turn white. So you've got a perfect radiation dosimeter up there. Remember, you're sending these things up 700 miles into the atmosphere. 700 miles. That's 3 times as far as the space station is right now. Okay, it's not 250,000 miles, that's as far as it gets to go to the moon. You'd be amazed how many kids think the space shuttle can go to the moon. The space shuttle is a school bus, and it's not going to win the Indy 500. At least not this year. So the space shuttle is the bus. Well, this thing went up 700 miles. Now the fun thing is, you said the mice up 700 miles? Setting them up was not a problem. Getting them back was a problem. Those of you that fly airplanes, fly in them or fly them, takeoff is not a problem. Landing, that's the fun part. And any landing that you walk away from is a good landing. So this thing is going to land somewhere. It didn't land in the water, it landed on the land, like the Russians do, in a small area of Arizona. You ever tried finding a pocket watch in Arizona? Well, the problem was, once it landed, can you keep the mice alive long enough to find them and get them out of the capsule? And in this case, the first ever mice sent into space and successfully returned. The key word is successfully. That was his project. What went up there? Part of Converse went up there. The night before, he had to take them to Florida to get to the rocket to get them up there. He said, we haven't got enough oxygen to keep them alive long enough. But if you put in a substance called lithium hydroxide, it absorbs CO2. Now you've got enough oxygen, because the CO2 will